You in this room all know that reconciliation is not a single moment in time. It's a process. It's a cultural shift. It's a change in the way in which we think about Canada, Canada's institutions, and who we want to be. So what do I mean when I say that? As National Chief Bellegarde has already mentioned, I was a law professor at McGill for 20 years before I jumped into political life. One course I taught at that institution was Quebec civil law property. First-year course, starting right at the beginning, first year. New students would come through the door with a civil code in one hand and a notebook in the other, later a laptop, ready to learn about Quebec's unique private law legal system. But that wasn't where we started the course. Instead of looking at Quebec civil law, our first day, and indeed our first week, was spent exploring the traditional property system of the Wet'suwet'en people, a system that predated Quebec civil law and grew completely outside of the Western legal tradition and abides today. We would spend the rest of the week using the materials that we had to learn and discuss the legal traditions of the Wet'suwet'en, the social traditions of the Wet'suwet'en, and trying to learn about some of the traditions, we couldn't do it all, of the many legal communities, Indigenous legal communities across Canada, legal traditions across Canada. When we did finally arrive, months later in that course, at landmark Supreme Court decisions that tried to define Indigenous rights, including a famous one that dealt with the Wet'suwet'en people, it was already clear to my students that the system was flawed. One legal system had completely engulfed the other one, allowing the majority to impose its laws on the minority, the essence of colonialism. But the point I made to them, to my students, and the one I'd like to repeat now, is that it does not need to be this way. In our pluralistic country, with its deep, dark history of colonialism, we have a responsibility, I have a responsibility as a Minister of the Crown to rethink this approach. For meaningful reconciliation to happen, Indigenous legal traditions must be recognized in their own right and applied alongside Western legal traditions. Not everyone is going to be comfortable with this approach. But the alternative is simply unacceptable. From overrepresentation in the criminal justice system to ongoing conflicts over inherent rights, it's clear that the status quo has certainly not served the best interests of Indigenous peoples. This is what the TRC identified, as did the report of the Commission into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. It goes to the heart of a shift in culture that people in my position have a responsibility to listen, to foster, including elevating the voices of Indigenous peoples who are at the forefront of this work. We are a long way from our destination in this journey, but I believe what we have accomplished in partnership over the last 4 years is important.